All simply that we want to do is, when we're doing the census, find out if we are polling citizens or non-citizens. We even watered it down not to offend the left and say, are you illegal? That's not what we're asking here. And when our districts are drawn at the federal level for congressional districts, you all know that it's based on population. You all know handily that you get an advantage when you're including illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, and non-citizens in the population census. We also know that the left wants illegals to vote in our elections. We've seen legislation drafted as such at the federal and state level. We've seen court rulings that would allow illegals to vote in our elections. That's what this is about. And you guys just want to sit here and, you know, not put our citizens first. I mean, the fact that this is the debate we're having today, and you guys are going to vote against this bill overwhelmingly, is just so shocking to me. I think we should have, I think when we're doing the census, we should absolutely know and count citizens versus non-citizens. We should only be drawing district maps based on who are citizens in our country. That is the fairest way to move forward, and I think it should be truly nonpartisan. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield back. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Do any other members wish to be heard? The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 7.
I'd like to ask for a recorded vote if I could, Mr. Chairman.
It's the, yeah, we'll do one more.
We're going to postpone it? Yeah, we'll run favorably. That's fine.
That was the A&S.
Oh, there's
okay.
A&S.
All right. Okay. We'll do the bill now. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 7109 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is ordered favorably reported as amended.
Yes. I'd like to request a recorded vote,
please. The
please.
gentleman from Maryland requests a recorded vote. A recorded vote is ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 7868, the FEHB Protection Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 7868, the FEHB Protection Act, a bill to require the Director of the Office of Personnel Management to take certain actions with respect to the health insurance program carried out under Chapter 89 of Title V and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7868 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for statement on the bill and the amendment. The Federal Employee Health Benefits Program provides quality health insurance coverage for nearly 8 million federal employees, retirees, and their family members. With nearly $60 billion in combined annual premiums paid by the government and enrollees, this committee has a vested interest in ensuring the program is free of waste, fraud, and abuse. In 2022, the GAO released a report that found ineligible family members enrolled in federal health plans. According to the Office of Personnel Management Inspector General, the enrollment of ineligible family members may cost as much as $3 billion in improper or fraudulent payments annually. This bill incorporates solutions from GAO's report to better prevent, identify, and reduce fraud, waste, and abuse resulting from enrolling ineligible family members in the federal health plan. First, this bill requires employing offices to verify the eligibility of family members receiving coverage to better ensure those who are added to the rolls are legally eligible. Second, the bill requires OPM to audit the documentation and ranks of the enrollees to identify those who may have slipped through the cracks. Further, the bill requires disenrollment or removal of ineligible individuals from coverage. And finally, the bill requires OPM to incorporate a review of ineligible family members in their fraud risk assessment of the plan to better inform the scope of the problem and identify additional solutions. I want to thank the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Waltz, for his leadership on this issue, and I now yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Waltz from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this markup today and allowing me to speak in support of my bill. As you mentioned, the Office of Personnel Management administers the largest employer-sponsored health care program in the country, known as the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program, the FEHB. Among others, FEHB program provides health insurance benefits to federal employees, retired federal employees, and their family members. In fiscal year 21, the FEHB program provided benefits to over 8.2 million individuals at the cost of approximately $59 billion. And given the magnitude of the program costs to the American taxpayer annually, one would expect, I think you would expect, Mr. Chairman, I certainly would, that OPM would conduct regular oversight to minimize fraud within this program. However, and here's the headline, Mr. Chairman, since its implementation in 1960, OPM has never, I repeat, never conducted a comprehensive audit of the FEHB program. Further, only in 2021 did OPM begin even requiring federal employing offices across the whole federal government to review the supporting documentation during new hire enrollment. Things like qualifying life events to verify family member eligibility. Unfortunately, OPM is still unable to ensure employing offices are executing basic verification requirements, and it's unacceptable. The American people deserve to know that their tax dollars that they earned are being spent appropriately, free from fraud or waste. And in its current form, this program is susceptible to fraud and abuse, as demonstrated by the numerous cases of individuals enrolled in and receiving coverage through the program, even though being ineligible for that coverage. This is why I've introduced the FEHB Protection Act to combat fraud and abuse within the program. Implements, Mr. Chairman, a couple of common sense changes. One, it requires the federal agencies to verify that when an employee adds a family member to their health plan, the family member is legally eligible to receive those benefits. These are common sense changes, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we should have to legislate that OPM should do it, but apparently we need to. Secondly, it would require OPM to review the risk of ineligible individuals receiving benefits when conducting risk assessments. Third, it requires a comprehensive audit and review of verification documents. And finally, it will require OPM to disenroll individuals currently enrolled in the program if they are determined to be ineligible. Comprehensive auditing and enrollment verification for benefit programs is not new. In fact, at least 25 states have conducted audits of their state-run benefit programs. In my home state of Florida, a 2018 audit of the state health benefits found that a large number of enrollees in the program, 3% of the overall program, were ineligible to receive coverage, resulting in over $20 million in savings. One could only imagine, with the magnitude of the federal program, what we would save the taxpayer. The OPM's Inspector General estimates the annual cost associated with ineligible enrollees in this program to be about $250 million to $3 billion. With the potential to save the American taxpayers $3 billion, I think passing this bill is a no-brainer. I want to thank my friend and colleague, Senator Rick Scott, for working with me on this companion bill in the Senate. I thank the chairman and your staff to bring this critical legislation to the committee for markup, and I urge my colleagues' support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Raskin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for bringing this bill to markup, and thank you, Mr. Waltz, for your hard work on it. FEHBP is the largest employer-sponsored healthcare program in the country, with 8 million employees participating. In December of 2022, the GAO issued a report that estimated that ineligible family members could be costing FEHBP approximately $1 billion a year. The OPM Inspector General has estimated the cost of ineligibles at somewhere between $250 million to $3 billion a year. While OPM is responsible for administering this program, it relies on over 160 different employing offices to enroll and then verify the eligibility of members. In recent years, OPM has put in place certain procedures to verify the eligibility of family members for qualifying life events like marriage, divorce, birth of a child, and so on. OPM does not have and does not plan to have a monitoring process for verifying the eligibility of family members of existing FEHBP members. So this act would require federal agencies to verify that an employee is eligible to add a family member to their health coverage plan. The bill also requires OPM to consider coverage of ineligible individuals while conducting fraud risk assessments of the FEHBP system. The bill further requires OPM to conduct a comprehensive audit of employee family members currently enrolled, including a review of eligibility verification documentation like marriage certificates and birth certificates. Finally, the bill requires OPM to disenroll or remove from enrollment any ineligible person found to be receiving coverage. Several states conduct similar audits, like California, Florida, and Kansas. California requires re-verification of enrollees every 3 years. Its audit saved the state in 2015 nearly $122 million. In 2018, Florida's audit avoided more than $20 million in costs. These states made upfront investments in oversight that reaped a lot of savings downstream. This bill is well-meaning and would improve our bipartisan goal of combating improper payments and fraud, but I do believe it should include funding to conduct the required audit. This audit will include examining every FEHBP participant to determine eligibility across the whole enterprise of the government, and I plan to offer an amendment on this point at the appropriate point today, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members wish to speak on the Waltz bill? Seeing none, the gentleman from Maryland has an amendment.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Will the clerk please report?
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7868 as offered by Mr. Raskin of Maryland.
So my amendment addresses...
Hold on. I'm sorry. Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. I reserve a minute.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I want to, with a genuine friendship, also acknowledge that the gentleman, Mr. Raskin, and I believe at least one or two other members of the Democratic Party will be all in this committee will be supporting this. That comes directly from a GSA report, the Inspector General at GSA, about what they see in the operation and the need for this. Mr. Chairman, this is straightforward legislation that would bring basic transparency to technology projects from the General Services Administration. As it stands now, the government's internal technology consultancy is mostly opaque in its operation, resulting in a lack of competition and a few instances of serious failures of GSA projects and products. Last year, the GSA Inspector General reported that login.gov, a GSA product that was intended to be a sign-on solution for the federal government, intentionally misled federal agencies about its technical capabilities and ability to authenticate users. So this is what internally they've recognized. I think we held hearings last year that were on a bipartisan basis, very productive. This is that legislation that follows from that, and I want to thank my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for not only recognizing this, but trying to correct things that is seen by everyone as a problem. Mr. Chairman, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now unfavorably reporting H.R. 7524 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no.
Mr. Chairman.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Chair recognizes Mr. Sessions.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested by Mr. Sessions. A recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 7887, the Allowing Contractors to Choose Employees for Select Skills Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 7887, the Allowing Contractors to Choose Employees for Select Skills Act, a bill to amend Title 41 to prohibit experience or educational requirements for proposed contractor personnel in certain contract solicitations and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7887 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. The substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to discuss the bill. The federal government relies heavily on contract employees. Unfortunately, federal solicitations sometimes include unnecessary degree requirements mandating that individuals who perform the work hold certain education credentials. Training for many jobs in fields like IT and building construction is available through non-degree pathways such as apprenticeships and boot camps. That is why private sector employers have pared back degree requirements in hiring in recent years. We should not prohibit those with the right technical skills from performing federal contract work just because they lack a traditional degree. And the companies who employ them, those that offer apprenticeships and engage in skills-based hiring, should be encouraged to compete for government contracts, not be excluded from competition. This bill helps ensure that federal contractors are eligible to hire qualified professionals in the necessary knowledge, skills, and drive, even if they lack a traditional four-year degree. The bill does this by prohibiting contract officers from stipulating education and experience requirements for contract employees unless the contracting officer can justify in writing that they are necessary to meet the needs of the agency. I urge my colleagues to support this timely, necessary, and bipartisan bill. I want to thank Ms. MACE, Chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, for her great work on this very important reform. I now recognize the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Access Act is intended to address degree inflation, or the growing trend of college grads filling jobs that actually don't require college degrees. This practice leads to reduced earnings for college degree holders, reduced employment opportunities for non-degree holders, and an overall drag on the economy. Committee Democrats are supportive of efforts to eliminate minimum education and experience requirements for jobs that don't actually require such associated skills for successful performance, expanding opportunity for the more than 62% of the population aged 25 and older who do not hold a bachelor's degree. However, the Access Act would create a blanket reporting requirement that could be unnecessarily burdensome for federal agencies in the many instances in which minimum education or experience requirements are commonly understood to be necessary. This bill would prohibit federal agencies from specifying any minimum experience or educational requirements for contractor personnel in solicitations unless the solicitation also includes a written justification explaining why such requirements are necessary. Moreover, contracting officers would be required to determine, justify, and review each education or experience requirement separately. There are certainly jobs for which some minimum education or experience requirements are necessary. For example, approximately 39% of postings for construction managers require a college degree, as do 52% of web developer postings and 34% of distribution manager postings. This suggests that these roles are frequently performed successfully without a degree, and that the requirement is more about the preference of the employer than the demands of the job. So it would make sense for agency contracting officers to have to provide a written justification for choosing to require that contractors hire only college degree holders for such jobs, as this bill would require. However, there are also an array of jobs for which some minimum education or experience requirements are always necessary. For example, in 2022, the federal government spent almost $30 billion on medical services contracts and another $29 billion on engineering and technical support service contracts. Do we really want our contracting officers to have to provide a written explanation every time they put out a solicitation that requires healthcare and engineering professionals to have advanced degrees? That, to me, seems unduly burdensome. I will vote for this bill today, but I would ask the chairman and chairwoman MACE, my friend, to work with us before this bill goes to the floor to find a more tailored approach that creates accountability when warranted without imposing an impractical hurdle in the already complex contracting process. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Lady from South Carolina, and a very prolific bill passer on the Oversight Committee, Ms. Mace, for 5 minutes.
Hopefully we're doing one per markup or we haze the staff. Just kidding, just jokes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the ranking member as well. I also want to thank Congressman Krishnamurthy for joining me on this piece of legislation. When I was in college, I taught myself to code. I didn't get a degree in computer programming, and my first job was as a computer programmer for Anderson Consulting, and I'm dating myself, which is now Accenture. This is back in the late 90s, Y2K, et cetera. I learned like 6 programming languages, not at school, but on the job. And it's not just computer programming, but there are so many opportunities for contracts with federal agencies where a 4-year degree is just completely unnecessary. And so I see this as a great opportunity for a lot of different agencies, a lot of different departments, a lot of different people who don't need those burdensome and expensive 4-year degree requirements when they can do those jobs without them, and they can do them very, very well. In fact, I've got a member of my family who makes more than we all do in this room, again, in technology. Would love to see a person like that in the federal workforce. Never stepped foot on college campus. I mean, just an amazing talent. We want that talent in the federal workforce with these contractors. So I want to ensure that the government isn't denying work opportunities to skilled, qualified Americans just because they lack a 4-year degree. It's the same reason that I sponsored the MACE Act, the Modernizing the Acquisition of Cybersecurity Experts Act, last fall, which was adopted by the full House last year. While the MACE Act removes unneeded degree hurdles to federal IT jobs, the Access Act now takes down similar barriers, similar burdens that keep people from performing federal contract work. We have many Americans, about half the country almost, that don't have 4-year degrees. They have alternative training, they have certificates, they go to apprenticeships, boot camps, et cetera. And these alternatives are becoming more attractive as college tuition, because of government subsidies, becomes much more difficult to afford. That's why many of our nation's largest employers, including Walmart, IBM, Google, have dramatically reduced degree requirements in their job postings. These companies are now hiring individuals from many occupations based on their relevant job skills, not on 4-year degrees. But when these companies do contract work for the federal government, they sometimes find their skilled and successful non-degreed employees simply aren't allowed to take part. Ironically, these are often IT and cybersecurity contracts, as I mentioned earlier, areas where the government struggles to hire internally and relies heavily on outside help. In fact, there are a combined 700,000 unfilled cybersecurity positions within the federal government today and across the private and public sector. Too few degreed cyber professionals exist to fill the shortage. Yet at a cybersecurity, IT, and government innovation subcommittee hearing that I held in this room in January, an IBM witness testified the, quote, federal contractors are rarely able to place an individual without a 4-year degree on a technology services contract regardless of their qualifications. This hearing was the impetus for this bill because that's where I learned that this was a huge problem. And here we are today in a bipartisan way, Democrats and Republicans coming together. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was. And it's something that we should be working on together in a nonpartisan fashion. So this, of course, makes no sense. We want to make sure that that required educational credentials are fully justifiable. We want a doctor to have a medical degree, for instance, but only a fraction of federal contract work is performed by licensed professionals. So the bottom line is it should be a high bar for federal officials to deny individuals the opportunity to compete to do work for the government. That's why we need this bill. And under this bill, OMB will ensure agencies follow this new protocol, and it will provide them guidance on how alternative certifications, industry-recognized credentials, and work-based learning programs, such as apprenticeships, may satisfy educational requirements. And finally, the bill provides additional accountability and transparency with the GAO. The GAO will review and report to Congress on agency compliance under this law. So I want to thank Congressman Krishnamurthy for joining me in this effort today. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for their support during this bill today during markup, and I urge all members on both sides of the aisle to support this desperately needed legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Yields back. Chair now recognize Mr. Krishnamurthy from Illinois for 5 minutes.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin. Thank you, Congresswoman Mace, for highlighting this very important issue, and we've talked about it many times, which is, 2/3 of Americans don't have a 4-year college degree, as the ranking member mentioned. But unfortunately, they are often barred from opportunities for which they possess the skills and the qualifications to do the work. And when you bar them from doing those jobs or prevent them from doing those jobs, guess what? You have higher costs and lower access. And so this aptly named bill, the Access Act, allowing contractors to choose employees for Select Skills Act, allows our tax dollars to create the most expansive opportunities possible for the American workforce. Over-reliance on educational requirements does not enhance the quality of services we receive. On the contrary, as I mentioned, those limits likely lead to less competition and higher costs. Ensuring that we tear the so-called quote-unquote paper ceiling and end hiring discrimination has long been a priority of mine. In 2018, working with Republican G.T. Thompson, I helped with him author the landmark bill called the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, which revolutionizes career and technical education and skills-based education by prioritizing skills-based and non-four-year college career tracks for additional resources. This Congress, I introduced the Bipartisan Opportunity to Compete Act, which would fight discrimination by large employers against hiring those without four-year college degrees. Blanket degree filters and rigid formulas do not work. I'm very pleased to join with my Republican colleague, Nancy Mace, in a bipartisan manner, who, by the way, I did not know knows how to code in so many languages. I hope that comes in handy in this Congress. I'm pleased to work with her in helping to break the barriers that unfortunately hold too many people back in this country, which are minimum education and minimum experience requirements, which don't adequately allow people to gain access to the opportunities to participate in federal contracting. Again, I want to thank the ranking member. I want to thank Chairman Comer for allowing us to pass this bill on a bipartisan basis, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other